Miles Levy. Oh, hello, recording in progress. Yeah, so I'm Miles Levy, and I've been involved with this it's a real privilege to speak to you, actually, because it's been driven from the Pituitary Foundation and people like Pat McBride and Pat Gilroy around the world. And what I thought we'd do to set the scene for those that don't know why we're changing the name is there were quite a few cases of patients either coming to harm or dying or near death. And there was one particular case that certainly made me think we need to do something about it. And it was just before lockdown. I was speaking to an endocrinologist called Malcolm Prentice, who works in South London in Croydon. And we had chatted over the years about the confusion with diabetes mellitus, sugar diabetes, which everyone's got. And Malcolm told me about a famous case that got on News at 10. It was on the couch on breakfast TV, and it was soon after a panorama program that was on mid-staffs that was very famous when elderly people were dying because they were not giving water and people were drinking out of vases. And Rita Cronin, who was is the mother of this chap called Kane Gorny, who's a tragic case, who died at the age of 22. I'd heard the story, and I emailed the solicitor that was involved in the inquest and asked whether I could talk to Kane's parents. And his mum was incredibly gracious with her and generous with her time. And I had a 2-hour chat with her. I remember it was a beautiful day during lockdown. I chatted to her for 2 hours about Kane, and I was so struck by the story. I thought it would be a good educational tool, thinking ahead of exactly moments like now, actually. So we videoed ourselves on Zoom, and it's a 15-minute call, 15-minute Zoom call. And I don't think anybody could put the case for name change better than the mother of somebody whose son has died. So I thought, Lottie, if you could play that video, that would sort of get your eye in if you're uninitiated. So, Rita Cronin, thank you very much for joining us for the webinar. It's really very, very good of you. So just to recap, you're Kane's mum, Kane Gorny's mother, and we spoke for about an hour and a half last weekend, and I was very struck by the dignity with which you spoke and the clarity with which you spoke. And thank you very much for putting your head on the parapet to speak to us.
You're welcome.
Could you just, so this is going out to all endocrine specialist nurses, some of whom will know all about diabetes insipidus, some of them will not know anything about Kane's story. But just to start, just tell us a little bit about Kane himself as a person, what he was like, and, you know, perhaps before his illness and during his illness, and just...
Well, Kane was very outgoing and always very happy, very physically fit, ran every day jogging and was very, very fit. And we noticed that he started to become more tired, didn't want to go training, and he'd been jogging since he was about 8 and going to the gym since he was 8, and all of a sudden he said he didn't want to go anymore. So he said he was too tired to go to work, too tired to run, and I thought maybe he was on drugs or something like that, but it turned out he had a brain tumour. The brain tumour was growing on the pituitary gland, and this...
Boxer, wasn't he? Didn't you say?
Yeah, he was an amateur boxer.
And he was doing a social work or a psychology degree at the time.
Yeah, he was doing he'd gone to Kingston College to study sociology.
Yeah. And he had a lot of friends and
he had a lot of friends, and he was just a normal, lively, happy, outgoing young man.
And didn't you say you tried to convince him that he was on drugs or something because he smoked a bit of weed?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I
tried to take him to a rehab unit. That didn't go down well, did it?
No, he did occasionally smoke some marijuana with his friends. So I thought maybe this is what had made him loopy, in my eyes. So I managed to convince him that that was what was happening to him. So he stopped doing that, and I took him to a rehab place.
And didn't he say, I'm not going in there because it's full of druggies or something?
Yeah, he said, I'm not going there anymore because it's just full of drug addicts.
Yeah, yeah. And
I was very cross with him.
Yeah, well, of course, you're his mum, you're allowed to be.
Yeah.
But essentially, just to sort of wind things forward, he was diagnosed with a craniopharyngioma, I think, or a pituitary tumour, and it was all because he had this very high sodium level, and because of he was weeing and drinking a lot, wasn't he, because of the diabetes insipidus.
Yeah.
And then you said he got a lot better after he'd had the operation and had the desmopressin and all the medications, and he was told by the endocrinologist he had to take that for life.
Yeah. And he was doing well with that.
Was he?
Yeah, he knew he had to take it. He carried it everywhere. He knew he had to take it. It was, I think he only had it twice a day.
Yeah.
And if he'd been out for the night with his friends and hadn't taken it, he would come home in the morning and take it straight away. And it never, ever caused a problem. Okay. He was doing well with it.
All right, that's all good. And then, unfortunately, because he was on steroids, he got this unlucky thing where he had a hip problem, avascular necrosis of the hip, which meant he needed a routine hip replacement. And I think you'd taken a year off when he was ill, so he was up and running, and more or less. And so you felt that this was just going to be a routine procedure. Can you just talk us through what happened? I think you said it was in 2009. It was a bank holiday Monday, and you took Kane in to drop him off at the hospital. Can you just tell us what happened?
Okay, I took him to the hospital. It was bank holiday Monday, so they were a bit short-staffed, and we took his medication with us. So when we were being checked in by one of the nurses, we said he was fully aware of his medication, and we said he'll administer his own medication because he needs to take this every day. And of course, when you go to a hospital, you can't administer your own medication. They have to do it for you. So they took the medication off him, said it would be in his locker with a key, and that he would be able to, they would administer it for him. And then he went for his operation. That was the Monday, everything seemed fine. He went for his operation on the Tuesday. Well, we know that if you have diabetes insipidus, and you're having an operation, or even if you've got flu or a cold or anything, you may have to increase your dose to fight it.
Yeah. So he had his operation, that was a Tuesday it would have been, and did you say he rang his mate Kat or something saying it was all, what happened?
Yes, he phoned his friend after the operation. He came out, the operation went really well. He was alert, woke up, phoned his friend and say, oh, Cass, it's over now. It's all done. It's great. We've got Man United, and I think Britain's Got Talent or something was on.
Probably when things started to go wrong, the Man United thing. But yeah. Anyway, I
am. I can't remember if they won or not. But
anyway, sorry.
That's it. Yeah. That's the other brother.
Oh right.
Yeah. Then I said to him, Kane, I have to go to work in the morning, so I won't be able to come in early, as I had been doing, but I will be in by lunchtime. And he said, that's fine. You know, he'd been through worse, so it was fine. He was happy, alert. Everything was normal for him. And I went to work. I went to work on the Wednesday morning, and I got a phone call from Kane. Yeah. He said, I'm dying of thirst. I'm really thirsty. No one's given me a drink. He sounded very aggressive.
Yes.
So it turned out at this stage he was probably dehydrated, but he was saying, no one's given me a drink, I'm really thirsty. So I said, look, I'll be with you soon. Ask nicely, and they'll get you a drink.
Yes.
So he phoned me back in about 10 minutes and said, oh, the nurse gave me a drink. Bring some chocolates, because I feel bad now for shouting at her. Right. But he was in and out of...
And you said he'd lost the plot a bit when he initially developed the high sodium, the year earlier before he was diagnosed.
Well, he lost the plot a bit when he had the brain tumour.
Yes.
So it was that I thought, well, maybe the tumour's come back or something. It hadn't dawned on me that it was the diabetes insipidus.
So you turned up on the ward because you were worried about him?
Yeah. He'd called the police because he was so thirsty, and he couldn't deal with the thirst. So
he go to the police?
Yeah, he phoned the police from his bed.
What did he
with
say?
his mobile. He just said, "You need to get up here fast. They're all standing at the end of my bed laughing at me, and I can't get a drink."
So this is from a hospital bed, and the police
from
are
the hospital bed, but he couldn't get out of the bed because of his hip operation.
And then what happened? So the police had gone by the time you arrived?
By the time I arrived, the police had gone. The doctors and nurses were, they were around his bed, and some were laughing, and but I think it was more about they were shocked at his behaviour without realising that he was dehydrated. Well, because he was trying to get a drink.
Yeah.
He was pulling the curtains by his bed, trying to hold on to them so that he could get out of the bed to get some water.
He was literally desperate for a drink.
He was desperate for a drink.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're right, he was dying of thirst, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
So didn't they ring security or something?
So they phoned security because of his shouting and pulling the curtains, and security held him down, and he was just saying, "I just need a drink." So they gave him another drink, but this was sips in a glass. They took his drip off because where he was dehydrating and he was pulling and shoving, they decided that he might pull that out, so let's take the drip off. Then I said, "Oh, he had a brain tumour last year, maybe there's something wrong with his psyche." Yeah. And then they said, "Oh, we'll phone the psychology ward." So they phoned the ward for the brain, psychosis or whatever, and they said sedate him.
Yes.
So they gave him some diazepam.
Whereas actually he needed to be as awake as possible to have a drink.
Be awake to drink, and he needed the drip.
So didn't they think it was drugs? They thought it was drugs, or they just zonked him out?
They said to me, is he coming off drugs? I said, "Of course he's not coming off drugs. He's been fine at home, absolutely nothing wrong with him. It must be something to do with the operation and the tumour."
I gather he was zonked out with major sedatives probably, and then you came in 7 o'clock the following morning because you were worried, and I think the junior doctor the night before was a little bit offhand with you, and then what happened in the morning?
Right, what happened is the day before they gave him the injection, put him to sleep, and he stayed asleep the whole afternoon from 4 o'clock right through to 8 o'clock. His dad came in, I left. His dad left at 11 o'clock, he was still asleep. He called the nurse and said, "Is this his belly?" He wakes up. We hadn't realised by this stage. Next morning, I was so worried. Next morning, I went in at 7 o'clock in the morning. I saw him on the bed. His tongue was swollen, his lips were swollen, and he was delirious. And I looked at him and I was shocked, and I said, "Are you okay?" But he still registered it with me. And he said, yeah. I said, "Are you thirsty?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll get you a drink." So there was some Ribena on the side with a straw. I gave him that. He sipped on it. And I just thought, this is not him, because he's just normal and alert and everything. So I called the nurses. They said, they shrugged me off. They thought I was neurotic. He's 21. Why are you worrying about him? He's had breakfast. There's no way he could have had breakfast. His mouth was too swollen. He couldn't have swallowed anything. So eventually, a doctor came in. He was doing his rounds, and I heard him. And I couldn't see him, but I heard him. So I went out onto the ward and I was looking. I found the doctor and I said to the doctor, "Can you come and look at my son?" He said, "Of course."
It sounds like it was the consultant orthopaedic surgeon who was doing his work.
Oh yeah, he was a orthopaedic doctor.
So what happened? He came in and realised that it was a serious situation.
Yeah. He came in, started shouting, called everybody, "Get this, get this, get this." And then people started running into the room, and equipment started coming into the room. This was at 9 o'clock. And then about 5 to 11, I was waiting outside. I'd contacted his father and said, "You need to come up here quick. I don't know what they're doing to him." And so he came up, the two of us were standing outside the bedroom, and then the consultant, I think it was, this time, I think it was an endocrine consultant by this stage.
Yes.
He came out, he was very angry, and he just looked at us two and he said, "You need to get in there and see your son, he's dying." And then that's his exact words. He was angry, and he wasn't angry with us. He was angry with the situation, and that nobody had stopped this from happening. And we went in, and he was already dead. And he was lying with his arms stretched out on the bed, and he had all the like iodine and
trying to get lines in him, I guess.
He was complete, and he was cold.
Oh, what a terrible thing.
Yeah, it was horrendous. All because of that tablet that he didn't get. But the staff on the ward didn't really understand what the condition was.
Quite. Well, I mean, it's a dreadful story. And I mean, we spoke for an hour and a half the other day, and I was talking, hearing.
So the video cut out then, but that I don't think you could get a better advertisement for name change. I mean, I've heard that story, probably about 20, 30 times now. It never fails to sort of move me because it's such a preventable death. So and of course the problem was that the nurses on the ward thought that he had sugar diabetes, and were measuring his blood sugars. And didn't really recognize that he needed fluids and desmopressin, which was where this sort of whole initiative came from. So I thought that, I mean, maybe I hand it over to you, Lottie, because you are you're the master and mistress of ceremonies, but that's a slightly sobering way to start. But if anyone was wondering about the imperative for name change, that's more or less it. And there were similar stories around the world, and I can see that there's Julietta there whose brother died, Charlie, who may want to say a few things, and I was just sort of checking out a few people on the camera, and I could see a few hands over mouths and a few tears, so it clearly is a moving story.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite upsetting, that story, really. But yeah, it's sort of important to understand, I think, the reasons for the name change, because I think that is a question that we've had a bit, is sort of why was it needed by some people that perhaps didn't understand the sort of severity of it being confused with diabetes mellitus. So I'm going to start to go into a few of the questions that we've sort of had from people over the last few weeks. But if people want to put questions in the chat that they might have about the name change, then please feel free to do so, and we'll put them to Miles. So one of the questions we've had a lot of is about, is this going to be a worldwide change? So yeah, is it just the UK or is it worldwide?
Yeah, so that's exactly the right question to ask. So one of the amazing things about this is that we've, in the space of 2 years, managed to get approval from the UK, the clinical committee, but for all the doctors in the UK, all of Europe, all of America, all of South America, all of Australia, Japan. So this is absolutely a worldwide initiative. So we formed this working group, and once every month or two, we, in fact, I think I can see Deborah Cooper's on the call, and she joins the call once every month or so. We've had a meeting which is absolutely global, and the problem with that is a nightmare finding the right time, because it's obviously the time zones, but it's all right for us because we seem to do it 11 in the morning, so that's great. But yeah, it's absolutely a global pursuit, and it's not just endocrinologists, of course, because it's not just it's renal doctors, kidney doctors, it's acute medics, it's pediatricians. So it's been a bit of a challenge trying to it's a bit like trying to invite everyone to a party, make sure you don't miss anyone out, or like the groom's speech, make sure you don't forget to thank the bride's parents. So we've had to keep everyone in the loop, but absolutely it's a global thing. And the most important thing is to make sure that patients are on board with it, because we don't want to push this uphill, but we were it was driven by patients saying that they had a problem with people not understanding the difference. I mean, I don't know whether people know about the word diabetes, but I don't know whether people have asked the reason about diabetes and why we're changing away from that, Lottie, but I don't want to sort of talk too much.
That's okay. So another question we've had is about the World Health Organization and all the endocrine societies. So has agreement been made by those yet, or what will the process be like to get that agreement?
Yeah, well, I mean, all the clinical committees of the Society for Endocrinology have agreed. And so, I mean, I don't know very much about the World Health Organization, which is a different group altogether. And I don't exactly know what the World Health Organization does, but this is a group of clinicians that have decided, for the sake of patients, that we need to change the name. There's been precedents for this, so we're not the first people to change the name of the condition. So I was saying before we came on air, there was a rheumatological condition where people got kidney problems and lung problems and joint problems. It was called Wegener's granulomatosis with a W, Wegener. And there's another condition called Reiter syndrome, and people decided to change the name because those two doctors were Nazis, and people didn't like the idea of calling the name of a medical condition after a Nazi. So the rheumatologists changed the name, and the name has stuck. So it's the clinical committees and the clinicians are the ones that decide to change the name. And basically there is a group under the World Health Organization called the ICD-11, which is the International Classification of Diseases. And there's another classification system called SNOMED-CT. So every time your GP types in a name of your diagnosis on a computer, it has to have a classification. And we've absolutely got on board the person that I managed to track him down, called Ian Green, who runs the UK arm of SNOMED-CT, and is going to help us change the name in 32 countries. So anybody who wants to use the word diabetes insipidus absolutely still can. We're not making it obligatory that you have to remove it. But the point is, if you go into an A&E and you say you've got diabetes insipidus, you might get confused with having sugar diabetes. And just I might as well tell you about diabetes. So the word diabetes is a Greek word that means like a siphon, which is when water is a sort of machine where water goes in and water goes out. So it's just the clinical description of somebody who's very, very thirsty and pees a lot. And so, you know, if you're all patients with diabetes insipidus, so that's the hallmark of the condition is you wee gallons of pale urine and you're very thirsty. But the other very important cause of people weeing and drinking a lot is if you've got high blood sugar. Okay, and that's diabetes mellitus or mellitus. And mellitus is the term for sweet, and insipid is the term for pale. And in the old hundreds of years ago, no one had type 2 diabetes, which is the condition that everybody's got now because of the obesity epidemic. So if you use the word diabetes, everybody thinks now of type 2 diabetes. But hundreds of years ago, no one was overweight. And it was only type 1 diabetes, which is a disease where you died if you didn't have insulin. You used to waste away. And so the way doctors used to make the diagnosis, believe it or not, is they either used to taste the urine, and if it was sweet, it was sugar diabetes, or what they did was they poured the urine on the floor and got insects, ants nearby, and if the ants crawled towards the urine because it was nice and sugary, they called it diabetes mellitus because it was nice and sweet. They could get lots of nice goodness and energy out of it. And if they crawled away from the pale, insipid urine, which means lacking in quality, it was diagnosed with diabetes insipidus. And so that was a useful name in sort of, I suppose, the 1900s, but we're now in 2023. And even in Leicester, we've moved on a little bit from that way of making the diagnosis. So the problem is you come into A&E and you say you've got diabetes insipidus and people just switch off with the second part of the word and they think you've got sugar diabetes. So it doesn't really matter what the word is, the name is, as long as it doesn't have the name diabetes in, or they'll just measure your blood sugar.
Okay, and then another question we've had is, how is this change going to be communicated to healthcare professionals? I think a lot of people are concerned because they've put in a lot of work advocating for themselves with diabetes insipidus, and they're now concerned that that work's all going to be undone with arginine vasopressin deficiency. Yeah,
well, listen, we need your help with it. I mean, first of all, we've done a slightly unprecedented thing. which is we have published in every journal around the world on the same day. It's very, I mean, it's brilliant for my CV, but we published in every endocrine journal around the whole world about name change, but that's just talking to ourselves, talking to endocrine audience. Now, through Malcolm Prentice, I have met a PR person called Sam Giannini, who's been brilliant, and she's actually really helped. We play music as well, but we are going to end up with Rita's help. And in fact, I got a grant from the Society of Endocrinology. So we are going to make sure we get on national radio, and we're going to make sure we get on TV. And I've got lots of contacts for that. We'll get on the Ben Shepherd thing on ITV. We'll probably get on BBC One maybe in a few more when the time is right. So we'll do the media stuff. I'm not shy. I'm happy to do that with Rita and with Sam's help. And we're going to try and do the same thing all over the world, really. Get on radio and TV stations around the world. We will publish in the General Medical Journal. So we're going to publish later on in the year in the general journals. We've got buy-in from the Royal College of Physicians. In fact, I had a meeting on Monday. There's something called the National Confidential Inquiry for Perioperative Deaths, or NCPOD, which is, it's an NHS initiative to sort of stop someone's wrong arm getting cut off and things like that. It used to be a surgical thing, but we managed to get salt and water disorders as the main topic. Quite proud of that, actually, for next year to be the main topic for NHS safety. So salt and water is going to be seen as the main, one of the main NHS. And we had a meeting with the chief executive of NCPOD on Monday, and I'm in the process of recruiting doctors from emergency medicine, acute medicine, ITU, renal medicine, surgery, general physician, pediatrics, nephrology, and we're going to form a group of doctors that can form this sort of document by the end of the year. We'll have 2 or 3 meetings. It will take all day, and then by the end of it, we will divide and conquer. But we absolutely need your help to spread the word.
Yeah, definitely. Pat has put in Pat Gilroy has put in the group chat about telling your doctors, and that's important. If you don't know Pat, she's is the admin of the Got DI Facebook group. And
by the way, been brilliant. By the way, has been brilliant and helped us publish a paper in the Lancet looking at over 1,000 patients with diabetes insipidus, or the artist formerly known as, soon to be, and we found lots of really, really useful information. So, you know, you are the answer, really. So whoever asks a question about, are we going to undo things with diabetes insipidus, hopefully, so that it won't be known as diabetes insipidus and people will not confuse your condition with sugar diabetes. So, but we do need your help with that for sure.
Okay, so my first question I've got from the chat is from Cherry. So they've asked, how will all the historical research papers that mention diabetes insipidus be preserved? For examples in search engines with the name change.
That is a brilliant question.
I agree.
Something that we've worried about. So to start off with, and remember, there is precedent for this with Wegener's and other conditions. To start off with, we'll use the old term in parentheses, in other words, brackets. So you call it AVP deficiency, in brackets, cranial diabetes insipidus, AVP resistance, in brackets, nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. So the name in brackets will stick. And we want to do that for as many years as it takes for all the search engines to be able to know that they are synonyms for the same word. So when you write a paper, when you put a keyword into Google, basically the keywords could be this, that, or the other. So if you type in heart attack into PubMed, there's a whole tree and branch that could be ischemic heart disease, coronary disease, myocardial infarction. So names are sort of what you type in will have loads of names associated with them. So there will be years of overlap, and the very reason for that is we don't want to not be able to find important work in the literature. So we have thought about that, and it's a really, really important question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So our next question is from Ruth. She has asked, do we need to inform workplaces of the new name? Yeah, they've said that some of their managers are not very understanding and they think that they're making up the condition. And then they've also asked, how does it affect health insurance and how should we make sure that we are fully insured?
I mean, these are all questions I can't answer. I'm not very good at it. Or, but I mean, the answer is probably get a new boss if you've got a new job. If you've got such an understanding, it doesn't matter what your condition's called. It's not your boss's business what your condition is called. You absolutely can still call it diabetes insipidus. It's not a swear word. Absolutely, there are no there's no ban on the term diabetes insipidus. I use it all the time. I still will. It's quite a good clinical description in many ways. It's just not helpful if you're in A&E to say you've got diabetes insipidus. In terms of health insurance, well, I mean, the thing that's more of a problem in different healthcare systems. So, for example, in America, what will probably happen is if they really want you to change the name to AVP deficiency, then you'll be able to call it diabetes insipidus, but you won't be able to bill anyone. In other words, you won't get paid. So money usually talks. So there are ways of making people change their minds. But I don't think any of that will be. I don't think that's a major concern. It won't change insurance. It won't change your job. It's just you just have to explain, just like we will. That yeah. Again, there's a condition called hemochromatosis, and it used to be called bronze diabetes. Okay, because patients used to go a bronze color and get diabetes, and it's because of iron overload. But if someone said they had bronze diabetes now, a bit like they'd be wearing a Victorian hat, and it would all sound a bit old-fashioned and quaint. I mean, language evolves.
Okay, and next question from Helen. This is a really good question. It's something that's come up quite a lot. So if you Google AVPD, it comes up with a personality disorder. Seems like that might cause some confusion.
Yeah, if you type it, well, it depends. As that's a really good question. No such thing as a perfect name. I mean, you can call it arginine vasopressin deficiency. If you typed in the full thing, then you wouldn't. But that will be the same for any. I mean, if you type in AVPR, you get alien versus predators. That's what Jova Bayliss is worried about. So if you called it ADH deficiency, then it's ADHD. If you called it vasopressin deficiency, it's VD, which gives certain connotations. So I don't think I have an answer to that, apart from the fact I don't think it's the end of the world, to be honest with you. You'll be able to find it, and God forbid you should come across something else. I mean, I don't think anyone would think you've got a personality disorder if you said you had, or some psychiatric condition if you said you had arginine vasopressin deficiency. But there's a little bit of sort of real politics in this, and I'll tell you the real reason for it is that Malcolm Prentice, who's the hero of this whole story, because he's the one that sort of asked me to help out, and he's the one that lives in Croydon, who's an endocrinologist who knows the case of Kane Gorny and wasn't looking after Kane, but it's in his patch and he'd heard about it. And he was very keen to call it pituitary insipidus, okay, which some of you might think sounds like a good name because it's pituitary insipidus. And for all the reasons, he wanted to keep it in the search engines, and it had the word pituitary. Now, the biggest players around the world didn't like that name at all. I wasn't bowled over by it because it's etymologically incorrect. It doesn't really mean anything. Not everybody has pituitary disease. I know we're the Pituitary Foundation here, but some people have hypothalamic disease. Some people have genetic defects. So it doesn't cover all conditions. And it was nearly going to be absolutely thrown out. The name wasn't going to be changed. And I was on a Zoom call like this, but to somebody called Miriam Chris Crane, who is the doyenne, the princess or the queen of diabetes insipidus now, because she's found a new way to diagnose it by something called copeptin stimulation tests. So the days of water deprivation tests are over because the vasopressin, the molecule, is cleaved from a bigger molecule. Anyway, she said, I do not like the idea of name change. Not particularly keen on it. And this name, this Malcolm Prentice, rings me about pituitary insipidus. So I kind of said, in a moment of, I don't know, clarity, I said, well, how about if we call it AVP deficiency and AVP resistance? And in the same breath, she said, my immediate reaction is I find the term convincing. And I thought, we're in. And then she emailed Jova. So she's the main person in Europe. And then she emailed me, I can't remember if it was the same day, but very shortly after, say she's had a word with Jova Bayliss, who's the main professor of diabetes insipidus in Washington, in America. He's the sort of most famous DI sodium person in the world. And he said Jova Bayliss is very excited by the name AVP deficiency, but was a bit worried that when he Googled AVPR, he came across alien versus predator. So I said to him, I think we can probably get around that, a bit like the person worried about the psychiatric term. So there's no, and then we've decided to, I'm not pushing this uphill, we just decided to collaborate. My genius, if anything, which isn't really there, is just to make everyone think it's their idea. And when you do that, all these famous professors start to suddenly think it's a good idea. So it's been a brilliant example of how clinicians and patients can show these politicians how to actually do it, because we can actually all come to some kind of agreement. And there has been a few bumps in the road. Not everyone likes it. Not all patients like it. Not all doctors like it. But we've kind of decided, again, I always come back to that video of Kane, thinking we've got to try and prevent that happening again. And if it means a few people have to take some medicine in terms of not quite liking the name, then maybe it's worth it. But we've certainly, the vast majority of people seem to think it's okay, but I've got no shares in the name.
So our next question is, do we know when the name will be updated on our medical records?
No, it'll probably, well, listen, this is quite an important year. It's the beginning of 2023. So it depends how things go with this ICD-11 and the SNOMED CT, the formal classification. I mean, we're changing the textbooks because most of the people in this group write the textbooks and give the lectures to all the medical students. And I write the chapter of Kumar and Clark of endocrinology, which is the one all the medical students have got. And a lot of them write the Oxford textbook of endocrinology, and we've got a thing called Endotext. So a lot of us are going to change the textbooks. And then what will happen is on your medical records, probably, I would say 2024, probably your doctor will have the option of either calling it diabetes insipidus, which you still will be able to do that, or you could have a preferred name of AVP deficiency, if that's what you've got. I mean, no one's going to, sort of inflict the name on you if you don't like it, for sure. But I would highly recommend, if you're in an emergency medicine, particularly at the moment when you've got A&E, you've got ambulances stacked outside A&E, if you come in and say you've got diabetes insipidus and someone's in a rush, they might just measure your blood sugar. So if you say you've got urgent AVP deficiency, they'll just look at you with a glazed expression because they won't have heard of it, and they'll have to Google it, and they'll realize that you've got something that means you're deficient in something that's got the letters AVP in, which is DD, and they give you a drug in hospital. It's called DDAVP, desmopressin, because it's and just to explain the arginine thing, I think it's amazing how you take for granted when you're a medic. Well, there's some things you think everyone's going to find fine. Lots of people have got the problem with arginine, and it's only 3 syllables. I can't quite work it out. The reason it's called arginine, vasopressin, is it's a very small molecule, a bit of geeky science. It's only 9 amino acids, so it's a really small molecule, very highly conserved in evolution. So all animals have this molecule, but in animals other than humans, the amino acid that makes it up in non-humans is called lysine. So that's called lispressin or lyspressin, okay? And the amino acid in humans is called arginine. It's just an amino acid, which means a little thing that makes up a peptide. And that's why it's called arginine vasopressin, and therefore it's called AVP. And the gene, because we're entering into the genetic era, so we are all going to be doing gene tests in the next few years for patients, and AVP is the gene and the AVP is the receptor. So in the scientific world, it kind of makes a lot of sense. And I think that is why all the very famous professors quite liked it, because it sort of ticks all the boxes. But I'm aware that the term arginine, I think Pat McBride didn't, a lot of people didn't like the name arginine, and I can sort of see why. It doesn't sound, I don't know, it sounds a bit weird. And apparently you just got to imagine you've got a Scouse daughter called Janine, and then you just say it's arginine. But it's anyway, there you go.
Yeah, I think Pat has just put that in the chat about the arginine, if that's how you pronounce it. That was a question that we've had a lot as well, is how do you pronounce it? But it is arginine.
My brain, Miles. I've just written that on the.
There you go. There you go. And you are, I don't know if I'm allowed to call you Scouse, because I know that's a real insult if you're not actually from Liverpool, that we're all vice versa, but
I am Scouse.
Oh, excellent. So arginine, yeah, I mean it's spelled ARG. I'll type it in the chat. ARG, see if I can spell it. Arginine. There you go. Maybe I can't send it. I'm not clever enough to know how to send something. But anyway, ARG. You could think it should be like arginine, like Jason and the Argonauts, but you pronounce it arginine. There you go. But call it AVP. Don't drive yourself crazy.
Okay, our next question is diabetes insipidus was a condition that classified for free prescription. Will this still occur with a new name?
For sure. Yeah, it'll make no difference to all that. And we'll make sure of it. But it's a very good point, because I don't think we've even thought about healthcare systems. And we're obviously talking about the NHS only, and this is a global pursuit. But I'm going to write that down, because, you know, part of the reason for me talking to you all today is to make sure we've got everything covered. And absolutely, I mean, the terms are synonymous. So I think you won't have to pay for it if you call it a different name. That would make no sense whatsoever. But we don't live in
I think there are a couple of people asking about the Got DI Facebook group. So hopefully,
well, that's definitely one for Pat Gilroy. I don't know whether you're still here and able to talk.
If you want to pop the link in the chat. Okay, our next question is from Harriet. This is quite a long one.
I mean, the answer to the Got DI is just Google Got DI, and we can give you Pat Gilroy's details, because she is incredibly, so there is she's based in America, but it's absolutely a global group, and it's got loads and loads of people, and they're really, really helpful. So the answer, you'll be pushing through an open door if you want to get involved in Got DI, and they have conferences, and in fact, we're going to Chicago to the Endo Society, and I think Pat is not too far away from that. So you never know, might give you a chance to have a nice trip.
Hello.
Oh, hey, Pat.
Oh, is that Pat?
Hi. Yes. The name of the Facebook group is Got Diabetes Insipidus with a question mark. So it's the full name, Got Diabetes Insipidus. And we are working on a name change, but it's kind of tricky. So that will be coming, but you are welcome to join us. And we do have a worldwide reach, and people are very excited about the name change. And as people were commenting about the name change, I will always use AVP Deficiency, the whole word deficiency spelled out, because that way it will, like Levi said, sorry, as Miles said, it will tell them very clearly what's going on, because they know AVP is the hormone, and deficiency behind it will make sure that they understand what the issue is. And it also will make sure that they don't think that we have avoidance personality disorder. So please join us in Got Diabetes Insipidus, and I hope that that helps. Thank you.
It really does, Pat. And I have to say, you've been a brilliant sort of friend to our group, and have got the wheels really very much in motion. And I can only apologize if we have to give you a headache by changing the name of your group to something else.
No, no problem. The other thing is, I did in one of my chat messages, I did put the link to an article that people can download and then present to their doctors. So, okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Pat. That's really, really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Okay, so our next question is from Harriet. So she said that she's actually at the same hospital as Kane. And she says that DI is still an issue, and that her mum has to advocate for her, but she does worry, especially if she's unconscious and family aren't able to help. She says that she has to sneak in her Desmo when she's an inpatient, and her friend has also had to help her as well. But now she's having an issue where my blood show no DI, but my urine shows I do have DI, and no one's explaining it, and this makes me more anxious for future admissions. What does it mean when you still have a pituitary growth and your MRI shows the bright spot and DI is still there, and urine shows DI is still present, but your bloods are normal? And she says that she only takes Desmo now when she's drinking too much, but it's more of when I'm an inpatient. And she has heard about partial DI, but she's not had that confirmed.
Yeah. Well, look, there's a lot in that question, isn't there? So first of all, about the hospital itself. The hospital that Kane was in is a very, very good hospital, and it's not isolated to that hospital. So I did a survey around the whole country to every endocrinologist in the country, both consultant, registrar and specialist nurse, and 55% of the whole country said that they had had a problem with the recognition of this condition, and also the availability of desmopressin, because it's not a drug that most people know about. And so the problem with Kane was partly recognition of the condition and partly the fact that it's a problem with pharmacists to be able to get hold of the drug on the ward. And it's not a problem with endocrinology. It's a problem usually in the hospital of a non-specialist. And as Kane's mum showed quite clearly, as soon as the endocrinologist pitched up on the ward, he was really angry at the situation, not angry at Kane or his mum, but angry that this has been allowed to happen. So that will happen on any orthopedic ward around the country. So I wouldn't get too, just because you are a patient in the same hospital as Kane does not mean you're in a bad hospital. You're in a very good hospital. You're in the same sort of surroundings as most people, which is why we want to change it. So that's the first thing. So don't go thinking you need to find another hospital, but absolutely, it's a little bit surprising they're not a little bit more sort of on alert if there have been issues. We've done lots of things like trying to get desmopressin alerts, and so the thing about your blood test being normal and your urine showing that you probably got a low urine osmolality, sort of pale urine, is you have to be really, really unwell in order for your bloods to be abnormal. So most people that have diabetes insipidus, or the artist formerly known as, when they present, they will, before the days of desmopressin, people used to have to drink according to thirst. As long as you're drinking as long as you're having in what you lose, you will not get dehydrated, your sodium will be normal and your blood test will be normal. But the hallmark of the diagnosis will be that your urine will still be pale, because you will not be able to concentrate the urine to be nice and yellow unless you have desmopressin. So many people are in the same position as you that will have normal blood tests and pale urine. And I'm afraid that it's probably too nuanced to look at your specific case of partial AVP deficiency versus complete. And many people do have a normal posterior pituitary bright spot, which is when an MRI scan, if you have complete destruction of your posterior pituitary, which is a bit that produces vasopressin, and we're getting a bit technical now, then the whiteness of the posterior pituitary disappears. But I think, you know, one would need a good 15-20 minutes to talk about that, the whole of your case. So I didn't want to get too much into specifics, but everything you say is completely reasonable and I can completely understand it. And it's why, if you came to your hospital and said, I've got AVP deficiency, and the doctors felt a bit uncomfortable because they'd never heard of it, hopefully they will ring an endocrinologist straight away, and then they can come down and get some clarity on the situation.
Perfect. Thank you, Miles. So our next question is that there was discussion that desmopressin was going to be classified as a critical drug, such as insulin. Do you think this will happen?
Yeah, I mean, these are all absolutely brilliant questions. I'm really impressed. So, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there are 3 life-preserving medications in medicine, and they happen to all be relevant to the endocrine system. One is insulin, which is if you've got type 1 diabetes mellitus, you don't have insulin, you die of diabetic ketoacidosis. Another one, as the Pituitary Foundation well knows, is steroids, hydrocortisone. If you don't have hydrocortisone and you've got true ACTH steroid deficiency, then you will have an adrenal crisis. And vasopressin is the third one. And we are working with the Royal College of Physicians patient safety group. The chair of that committee, unfortunately, I've had to get involved in all these sort of boring committees, but there's a bloke called John Dean, who happens to be an endocrinologist. He's the chair of the safety committee, and Helen Simpson, who's an endocrinologist, done a load of stuff to do with hydrocortisone safety. We're sort of copying the same thing. Now, the most important thing is that each trust flags desmopressin as a critical medication. So your trust can make desmopressin a critical medication, and most places have an electronic prescribing system now. So we've got, in fact, the system's just changed, but if you prescribe desmopressin as a doctor, there will be an automatic pop-up saying never miss out the dose. And Pat and the Pituitary Founder, Pat McBride, and the Pituitary Foundation have done brilliant work helping writing up sick day rules and what to do, and we've written articles and, you know, things like desmopressin cards. But the NHS Patient Safety Organisation and this thing I was on about the NC pod, we will try and make it such that desmopressin is never missed. But that is a whole thing going in parallel with the name change. So no one single thing is going to make it safe. The analogy I have used is it's a land, sea and air approach, and you need to sort of speculate to accumulate. And when things go wrong, it's normally, they call it the Swiss cheese. It means it's not one thing, it's a whole load of things. So if you want things to go right, this name change may make no difference, but it may make a slight difference. Desmopressin being a critical medication might make some difference. The most important thing is actually about fluid balance. And so one thing that I've started to do is, if someone's got a condition of vasopressin deficiency, DI, is I write on the name of the bed above the patient, please always make sure this patient's beaker of water is full. Please always make sure this patient's beaker of water is within arm's reach of the patient. And then actually what we've started to do is prescribe 400 mils of water 4 times a day on a drug chart. So the nurses have to give this brilliant drug that's very cheap called water. And I'm willing to bet if you did a clinical trial of water versus, because everyone talks about oxygen, everyone talks about nutrition, but I think water is actually an underestimated and appreciated drug in medicine. And that's what people die of in this condition.
All right,
It's a
thank
great
you, Miles.
question.
So our next question is, do we think that raising awareness general around AVP deficiency will help to make it easier for people to get diagnosed faster?
Well, that's also a brilliant question, isn't it? So what I would hope is that when we're doing this press campaign, actually absolutely raises awareness of the condition. And maybe people are going to be picked up with, maybe, you know, we're going to get inundated with referrals. That would be great. The other thing we've decided to try and do is create an AVP deficiency registry in the UK and maybe around the world, so that we can capture every patient who's got this. Because with sugar diabetes, there's a national audit that happens every year called the NADIA, where trusts are held to account on the safety with which they manage sugar diabetes. And we'll try and make it so that trusts are held to account on the way they manage AVP deficiency. And absolutely, if we can raise awareness so that people other than geeky endocrinologists know about the condition, then we'd have done something good, I think, for sure.
Yeah,
That's the
sorry,
aim. We need your help. Need your help with that.
I was just going to say that was me that asked that question, because it took me 5 years to get diagnosed, from the age of 11 to like 17. And I always feel like it was something my GP was very dismissive of, and coming up with all sorts of reasons as to why my urine was crystal clear, including even complimenting me on how hydrated I was.
Yes. Yeah. Well, how frustrating that must have been for you. And we've heard stories of kids that have licked the condensation off windows and puddles, and, you know,
Yeah.
these water deprivation tests, which are basically nothing short of torture.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I mean, myself again, and Pat McBride and John Wass, who's a famous endocrinologist, and Malcolm Prentice, we wrote an article in the BMJ for GPs, because that's the article that GPs wrote on how to think about this. And we did a podcast as well, actually, which you can look up on your phone. It's just called The Dangers of Diabetes Insipidus, and it's just on a podcast. If you type in BMJ, The Dangers of Diabetes Insipidus, you'll hear Pat giving a very eloquent account of what it's like to feel so thirsty that it literally drives you crazy.
I think I've listened to that before. Yeah.
All right. So all I can say is that, yeah, if we can spread the word, and if you want to get out there and spread the word and join I mean, I think what we should do actually is, when I've got Sam Giannini, the PR person, there is no doubt that a lot of the people on this group who want to be involved in the publicity, people listen to patients. They don't really want to listen to doctors that much. I mean, we have a role to play, and people ask complex questions about what arginine is, but in terms of actually the stories, and that kind of story that you have just told is a very powerful story in terms of picking up the diagnosis from its first presentation.
Yeah, I would definitely love to get involved.
Well, you're hired.
Yeah. I'm also a writer, so if there's any way I can write
blimey.
or
Sound like you could
anyway, I want to.
Might finally get some quality to our group.
No, not.
Yeah, that's great. You're in. Just you get my email address from Lottie, and
yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, that's fine. I can Kim can pop my email address in the chat, and if you just want to send me an email, I can put you in touch with Miles. Okay.
And actually, just sorry to interrupt, but we could maybe even do a similar Zoom call to what I did with Kane's mum, but from sort of your account of how frustrating it is to not get a diagnosis.
That would be really good. Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's do that one time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, so our next question, this is quite a good one. So this is from Lydia. Would ensuring patients carry an emergency medical card for AVP deficiency, much like that of the steroid card, would help in these emergency situations?
Yeah, again, another perfect question. And that is something that the Pituitary Foundation has done a lot with. And there is a Diabetes Insipidus card. And Pat, I don't know, McBride, whether you want to say the work that's already been done.
Yes, we've got the DI. So we've got 2 Diabetes Insipidus cards, but we will be changing those. And slowly but surely we will be changing the name. I'll put the AVP Deficiency, then DI in brackets for a while. But we do have a toilet access card, and we have the emergency card for diabetes, for AVP DI. So they can be ordered free from our website, and they're not the same as the NHS steroid card because that took a long time. But I think once the name change is in place, then we'd look towards doing something like that. But at the moment, the card is, it's as good as you'll find anywhere.
And there's a thing on the website as well, really good, about sick day rules, what
Yes,
you do
yeah.
if you've come poorly, a bit like so our plan is to copy the homework of steroids. And we've got Helen Simpson, who is really excellent at patient safety stuff, and she's on the Royal College of Physicians patient safety, and she was the one with John Wass and Vibke Arts, a famous steroid doctor from Birmingham, who managed to get it through the WHO. I think the Department of Health is a clunky bureaucratic thing, which is why it takes so long, but she's managed to do all that with steroid cards and get a steroid card with a QR code so you scan it. And we're planning to do exactly the same thing with AVP deficiency, whatever you want to call it. And so Helen will be our secret weapon for that, because she's done it with steroids.
Yeah, and I think Kim's popping the links to the toilet access card and the desmopressin dependent card in the chat as well.
Perfect.
Okay. So Lisa has asked, is there plans to raise awareness of conditions that cause AVP deficiency, such as histiocytosis?
Well, listen, most medical students don't know what histiocytosis X is. I mean, that's a very interesting condition, and it's an inflammatory granulomatous condition that can affect the skin and is one of the causes of AVP deficiency. I mean, I think the important point actually for the Pituitary Foundation is that if you've got a pituitary tumor and you've got symptoms of diabetes insipidus, AVP deficiency, then it means you've probably got an unusual pituitary problem if it's not post-operative. So a lot of people have their operation and get diabetes insipidus. But if you have a pituitary problem and you've got weeing and drinking and it is this AVP deficiency, then it might be an unusual pituitary problem like sarcoidosis, histiocytosis X, a condition called lymphocytic hypophysitis, craniopharyngioma. I mean, there's a whole range of things that a good medic should think of in a pituitary mass on a scan, lump on a scan with DI. And I think really that's more for education of the doctors rather than, I don't think it would be reasonable to go on the, Naga's couch on BBC One and start talking about histiocytosis X, or they might sort of drag you off and not think, what the bloody hell are you talking about? Even though it's a very important condition, it's rare, but absolutely. The most important thing is that if you've got this condition, you see an endocrinologist, and a good endocrinologist should know that histiocytosis X is one of the causes of DI for sure, AVP deficiency.
Thank you, Miles. Yeah, someone's mentioned about like awareness bracelets as well. And we do have a desmopressin dependent wristband, but I know some people prefer to get, oh yeah, someone is showing that on the screen right now. Thank you for that.
Well, very well modeled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's so if you get knocked over by a bus and someone finds you in the middle of the road, they'll know what to do on your behalf if you can't speak to them. So there is method in that for sure.
All right, I think we're coming to the end of the questions now. Is there anything else you want to add, Miles, that you think we haven't?
No, I think what I would say is I've learned more than you've learned from me, and I think the questions you've asked are brilliant, and it's absolutely an open house if anyone wants to contribute. So those that didn't want to talk out loud, if you've got questions or if you want to contribute either in your patch or nationally or internationally, then just send me an email and we'll see how we can fit you into the happy gang, because the whole thing has been a complete joy. No one's making any money out of this. And everyone's got busy jobs, so this is just purely collaborative stuff to try and help. There's sort of no agenda to this other than trying to make things better.
Yeah, I just put my email.
You. Sorry, how do we email you? How do we know your email?
Just email Lottie. Presumably Lottie's got her email address, and then just get hold of me there, because I don't seem clever enough to be able to type in the message.
Yeah, I've just put my email in the chat. It is literally lottie@churchery.org.uk. So if you send me an email, then I can get in touch with Miles with that. But yeah, we always love to have patient stories and things like that, really.
And if over the coming days you've thought of something, whatever it is, a question specific to you or specific to, or more general, just ask. Don't be shy.
Yeah, sorry, Juliet has just put something. When my brother Charlie died in hospital and afterwards we went through what went wrong, I said, could the patient not have a sign above the bed or indeed on the notes? And the endocrinologist said, yes, I would have put it up in tinsel and fairy lights. So I thought, don't be afraid to let the staff know and get stickers put up, etc.
Yeah,
thanks for that.
Absolutely. I mean, and Juliet has been really helpful, and her brother Charlie died in his 40s, and I think Juliet for some reason seems to sort of blame herself for not doing more or whatever it is, but she's and has been really good at going to meetings and helping out. And actually we had a meeting a couple of hours ago today because she wants to try and develop something called a smart catheter, which is something to like automatically calculate how much urine is coming out of a patient by using technology. And she's got me in touch with a medical person that's got a business in medical device, and it sounds like a brilliant idea. So again, Julietta has come up with potential solutions to the problem. That's exactly what we want. And by the way, another tragic unnecessary death that was potentially preventable. I don't know if you want to say anything, Julietta, now you're here.
Oh yeah, thank you. Well, I was just partially going to say thank you to Miles for changing the name, because I know it's sort of on first perhaps encountering it, it seems like a very complicated name, but I think it's so important because it's an invisible condition. And as with my brother Charlie, people didn't know he had it, they didn't know what it was. So if it makes the hospital staff, or indeed anybody around you, stop and think, well, what is this? I should look it up. Then that's all good, rather than persisting with thinking it's a condition that's something to do with diabetes, albeit, it's got some sort of historical links. But yeah, so that's going back to the medical or the fluid monitoring device idea. That was really something when I thought Charlie died 4 years ago, and I thought about it and thought, well, what went wrong here? And what had gone wrong was that his fluids were not measured accurately or enough. And it just seemed like one really simple idea, potentially, and it's a long way to go, isn't it, Miles? But that could change things for the positive and also have many medical or hospital applications.
Yeah, and again, if people want to help out with that, and there may be a bit of crowdfunding, who knows, then absolutely get stuck in, because there's desmopressin, but actually there's fluids as well. So thanks, Julietta.
Thank you. All right, I think we're coming up to the end of that end of the session. I don't think we've got any more questions. Thanks to everyone that's putting thanks in the chat. It's nice to hear. So I think Kim's just popped a donation link. Obviously we have put this on for free. I know lots of people have donated and we're very grateful for that. And if you are able to donate, it does really help the foundation. We are completely set up by we are completely run by donations and fundraising. So it does really help us to raise awareness, and with our support services and everything as well. And thank you to Miles. I've certainly learned a lot this session and found it really interesting, and I hope that everyone else has too.
You're very welcome. By the way, the Pituitary Foundation is brilliant. So we are really lucky. It's a brilliant patient organisation that is very, very sensible and very level-headed, and has brilliant information sheets. So I would use them as much as possible and make sure that, yeah, if you can contribute, to keep it going, because it's a difficult time. I would have thought in any charity, a charitable organisation, it will rely on sort of funding by us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.